They said the cries came only at night, thin, unnatural, and drifting across the pine-lined hollows of Darrow County, Alabama. But what the county sheriff found in the abandoned servants' cabins would be found wrapped in burlap, silent, and impossibly warm would never be written into any official record, because in 1912, Darrow County wasn't supposed to have any babies at all. The influenza epidemic and a string of mysterious stillbirths had emptied half the county's cradles, yet here there were infants with blank, unmoving eyes, placed carefully as if waiting to be collected. No prints in the dirt, no footprints in the dew, no sign a mother had ever carried them, and on every swaddling cloth, the same mark, a perfect circle of soot, 3 horizontal lines inside it, a symbol nobody claimed, a symbol everybody feared. The sheriff ordered silence. The church demanded obedience. The county doctor burned the first report, but the truth leaked anyway, and that's when people began whispering the same thing. It's happening again. A phrase only the oldest families understood. A phrase connected to a buried piece of Darrow County history older than the Civil War, older than statehood, older than written memory. A phrase tied to the one event no one dared mention, the hollow year, and the children it left behind. Darrow County sits deep in a forgotten corner of central Alabama, a place almost erased by time and purposefully absent from early maps. Travelers often described it as quiet in the wrong way, its roads too empty, its houses too far apart, its silences too heavy. Historical archives mention it only in passing. A failed agricultural settlement in the 1830s, a collapsed seminary in the 1850s, a burnt courthouse in 1874. Each institution lasted only long enough to leave a rumor, then vanished without explanation. Locals say the land itself rejects permanence. Homes rot too fast. Barns collapse before their beams should weaken. The soil grows cotton one year and nothing the next. Yet families stay generation after generation bound by inheritance, stubbornness, or something far more complicated. Old-timers spoke quietly of agreements made in desperate years, the kind nobody dared document. Agreements the churches denied while secretly enforcing, agreements tied to the woods north of town. The Braith Hollow, a stretch of pine and limestone sinkholes. No one trespassed after dusk. When the first unnatural infant appeared in 1912, placed precisely in the ruins of an old servant's cabin. The sheriff already knew the forest was involved. He'd been raised on the stories. He knew about the hollow year of 1846, a span of months so disturbing that the county elders burned all written accounts. Students at the seminary vanished. A maternity ward emptied overnight. And for nearly a full season, the only sound after sundown was a low, rhythmic humming from the tree line, the same humming neighbors were hearing again. It began with the farmhands, terrified, pounding on the sheriff's door before sunrise. Luther Parrish, a quiet man of 40, lived alone on the edge of the Braith Hollow. He'd heard a faint cry coming from the servants' quarters behind the old Ashervus. Abandoned for decades, its roof half collapsed, its windows sealed by vines. Inside, he found something that should not have been possible. A baby, unmoving, not dead, but not breathing either. Its chest didn't rise, yet the little body remained warm. Luther said its eyes looked unfinished, the irises lacking detail, more like pale ink than living color. The sheriff arrived before sunlight touched the cabin floor. The door was locked from the outside, its rusted bolt never disturbed. Dust lay thick inside except for the single, clean circle where the infant had been placed. And then there was the symbol, burned into the cloth. The sheriff recognized it instantly, but he pretended not to. The doctor, summoned reluctantly, examined the child for less than a minute before stepping back in horror. "This is not a newborn," he whispered. "This body, it's older, much older." The sheriff demanded he explain. "Bone density, muscle formation. It's consistent with a child at least 6 months old. But look at the fontanelle, it's like it never closed, as if time didn't pass correctly inside the body." The doctor refused to say more. Everyone else refused to even look. That night, the humming from Braith Hollow grew louder. The soot-black symbol circled with 3 horizontal lines was the part of the story most townspeople tried to forget, but it continued to appear, not just on the infant's cloth but carved into trees, painted onto stones, even scratched into the wooden beams of long-abandoned cabins. In 1912, only a handful of elderly citizens remembered its original name. The mark of holding it wasn't religious, and it wasn't written language. It was older, something the earliest settlers found carved into limestone caves during the first surveys of the Braith Hollow Valley. According to the county's oldest oral tradition, the symbol was part of an old ritual meant to root something into place, something that didn't belong in the ordinary flow of time. Early missionaries tried destroying the carvings, but new ones always appeared in the exact same locations, as if the forest itself restored them. Church elders eventually forbade anyone from describing the symbol publicly. By 1860, drawing it was an excommunicable offense. Yet when the sheriff stood in that cabin holding the cloth, He realized the old warnings had been right. The mark wasn't a message, it was a seal, and seals were only used to keep something contained, but something had broken loose. With the county pastor begged the sheriff to burn the infant and bury the ashes in separate locations, the same method used during the Hollow year. But before they could decide, more infants began appearing, one every 2 nights, always warm, always silent, always bearing the mark. Sheriff Amos Greeley was only 34, but he had heard the story since he was a child. His grandmother, one of the last living witnesses of the Hollow year, warned him that Darrow County's history had been cut open and stitched wrong. She claimed the disappearance of records wasn't accidental, it was enforced. So, after the second infant was found, he went where no officer was supposed to go, the sealed lower archive beneath the church. The archive existed unofficial its entrance hidden behind a false stone panel in the vestry, accessible only to elders of the county's oldest families. But as sheriff, he had keys to everything, and fear outweighs rules. Inside he found a dozen wooden crates labeled only with dates between 1845 and 1847. The pastor had insisted those boxes contained flood-damaged hymnals. They did not. Inside were medical logs, birth registers, private letters, death rosters, and fragments of a bound journal written by Dr. Josiah Penner, the county's physician during the Hollow year. Were the writings described a season of impossible pregnancies, infants that aged strangely, children who vanished from locked rooms, a series of stillbirths with identical anatomical anomalies, and something referred to repeatedly as the offering. One line was underlined so heavily the ink had torn the paper. Whatever emerges from the Hollow is not born, it is returned. The sheriff shut the journal slowly. Something wasn't happening again. It had never stopped. Dr. Ezra Holland had lived his whole life in Darrow County, normally a calm and methodical man. He became visibly shaken after examining the first infant. When the second arrived, found in a storage shed behind an abandoned sawmill, he quietly locked his clinic doors and refused patients for 3 days. The sheriff confronted him, placing Dr. Penner's century-old journal on his desk. Holland read, only a few lines before his face drained of color. "My father warned me this might return," he whispered. "He said the land keeps memories, even the ones we bury alive." The sheriff demanded an explanation. The doctor closed the curtains before continuing. "Those children your deputies are finding, they're not alive in the way you understand. They're vessels, bodies paused in some states between formation and function. During the Hollow year, dozens of infants appeared exactly the same." The sheriff asked the obvious question, where did they come from? Holland hesitated. The mothers never knew they were pregnant. The families swore the infants weren't theirs, and every last child carried the mark. Dr. Penner believed the symbol wasn't made by human hands. He thought the Hollow itself produced them, shaped them, using pieces of the children who were taken. Taken by who? The sheriff snapped. The doctor's voice fell to a whisper. Not who, where. The caves beneath the Braith Hollow stretch, deeper than any surveyor ever charted. Something down there imitates us, and sometimes it returns its mistakes. The sheriff felt cold move through him. Something was replacing children. With each new infant found, more families began quietly reporting something they all feared to say aloud. A child went missing, without doors opening, without windows breaking, without signs of escape or struggle. It started with the Whitlock family. Their 2-year-old son went to sleep in his crib. By sunrise, the crib was empty and the window still nailed shut. The blankets were warm, as if he had been lifted only minutes before. Then came the Mallory family. Their daughter vanished from the parlor floor while her mother turned to fetch firewood. The girl had been in the room alone for less than 30 seconds. And finally, the Vesey twins gone from a locked attic where their parents had placed them while repairing storm damage. No footprints, no broken boards, no way out. Every family reported hearing the same thing in the hours before disappearance. A low, steady humming drifting from beyond the tree line, so faint it was easy to dismiss, so constant it was impossible to forget. When the sheriff compared the dates of the missing children to the appearance of the infants found in abandoned cabins, sawmills, and sheds, the pattern tightened into something nightmarishly precise. For every missing child, another appeared, same dates, same nights, often within miles, but not the same child, not even close. Some were too large, some too small. Some had mismatched features, some had no facial detail at all, and everyone bore the mark. The sheriff realized that Hollow wasn't stealing children, it was replacing them. The Braith Hollow was not a deep forest, not in any normal sense. It was a narrow valley lined with pines twisted by uneven soil and limestone riddled with fractures. Locals believe the Hollow breathed in its own way, exhaling fog in spirals that drifted unnaturally low along the ground. No one went there willingly. Surveyors from the 1880s reported compasses failing without explanation. Miners tasked with exploring the subterranean tunnels abandoned the project after claiming the sound of soft tapping followed them miles. underground, but what made the hollow infamous were the sinks, deep circular depressions, where the earth had collapsed into caverns below. Some sinks were small as wells, others wide as barns. Each was ringed by stones etched with a mark. The stones were older than the town, older than settlement, or older than memory. Whatever culture placed them was long vanished, leaving behind only the hollow and its rituals. Dr. Pennisry Jenner referenced the largest sinkhole sink's mouth as the origin point, a place where the earth had split open after the Great Storm of '46, and where the first infants of the hollow year were found. When the sheriff and 2 deputies approached Saint's Mouth in 1912, the humming grew so strong it made the soil vibrate beneath their boots. The sheriff leaned over the edge. Cold air rushed upward, not the scent of earth or stone, but something metallic, like blood against iron. The mark had been carved into the inner walls dozens of times. The 3rd infant was found on a rain-soaked night. Lightning revealed its pale form on the porch of an abandoned rectory, swaddled in cloth so clean it looked out of place in the mud. The sheriff, exhausted and trembling, lifted the bundle only to recoil. The baby's eyelids were fused, shut, not sealed by injury, fused as if never meant to open. Dr. Holland examined the infant by lantern light. "This body is incomplete," he murmured. "It's like something tried to copy a human child but didn't finish the details." The sheriff demanded to know what the doctor thought the thing was. Holland's voice cracked. "A placeholder?" Before they could argue further, the lantern flame flickered violently. A low hum shook the floorboards. Every loose nail in the rectory began to rattle, vibrating in perfect unison. Then the humming stopped suddenly and the baby exhaled its first breath, a shuddering, weak intake of air, as if time had abruptly resumed inside its body. The sheriff stepped back so hard he hit the wall. The doctor whispered a prayer. On the infant's chest, under the layer of cloth, the mark pulsed faintly, so faintly that if they had removed the lantern or blinked too long they might have dismissed it. But both men saw it. The mark wasn't just a seal that it was functioning, and something inside that child had just activated the county's church. St. Braith's Chapel was more powerful than its size suggested. Its elders held influence over land deeds, school boards, even the sheriff's office. In a rural community built on tradition, their word was often treated as law, so when the infants began appearing, the elders moved quickly to control the narrative. They issued a strict order. No one was to speak of the symbols. No one was to mention missing children publicly. No one was to approach the hollow. They claimed the infants were victims of outside vagrants abandoning unwanted children, a lie so thin it collapsed under its own weight. But lies weren't meant to be believed. They were meant to be obeyed, behind closed doors. The sheriff confronted Pastor Ellie Brand, the aging head of the chapel. Brand listened silently, his thin hands folded, his eyes avoiding the sheriff's. Finally he said, "There are truths older than our faith, older than our language. The people who carved those marks understood something we lost, something we were never meant to rediscover." The sheriff pressed him. Pastor Brand's voice fell to a whisper. "The hollow returns what was offered, and it collects what was promised." When the sheriff demanded an explanation, Brand's demeanor hardened. "Stop searching, stop asking, and do not speak to the mothers. Their grief is real, but their memories are compromised." The sheriff left the chapel with the sickening knowledge that the church didn't fear the infants, they feared what might come after them. When the sheriff visited the grieving mothers despite the church's orders, he found a disturbing pattern. None remembered giving birth. None remembered the nights their children disappeared. None remembered the exact moment they last held them. The gaps in memory were such a precise, clean, identical. Mrs. Whitlock, normally a strong and clear-headed woman, wept as she described a dream she'd been having for months, walking barefoot through the hollow, drawn by a soft humming, carrying something in her arms. She couldn't see. Mrs. Mallory described waking with mud on her feet and pine needles tangled in her nightgown, despite having no memory of leaving her house. The Vesey twins' mother refused to speak at all. She sat in her rocking chair, swaying gently, humming the same low, unbroken tone that echoed through the hollow at night. The sheriff recorded the women's statements carefully, but when he returned the next morning, all 3 denied ever speaking with him. Their expressions were blank, their eyes dull. Behind them each arm had its curtains drawn, as if hiding something no one wished to see. Dr. Holland reviewed the sheriff's notes and said quietly, "This isn't trauma. This is interference. Something is editing their memories." The sheriff felt a chill creep up his spine. If the hollow could shape infants, could it also shape recollection? Were the mothers participants in something they could no longer remember? And if so, who was guiding them? Or worse, what? The 4th infant was found in a place no one expected. The old seminary basement, sealed since 1899 after a fire gutted the building's upper floors. Its windows were bricked over, its doors padlocked. The sheriff had the only key, yet inside the dust-coated basement, lying atop a rotted lectern, was an infant with skin so pale it resembled wax. This one had fully formed eyes, but they were solid white, without pupils. Carved beneath the lectern was the mark. Dr. Holland examined the infant under lamplight. "Look at the hands," he murmured. "The nails are grown, too grown, and the limbs. These proportions are inconsistent with any natural development." The sheriff asked what that meant. "It means something tried to assemble a child using incomplete instructions." The infant stirred suddenly, its head twitching toward the nearest wall. Then its tiny hand lifted, pointing toward the bricked-over window. Behind the bricks, a faint vibration, a low hum. The sheriff stepped closer. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The symbol carved into the lectern flickered as if reacting. And then, for the first time, the sheriff heard something behind the humming voice. Not a human voice, not language, but sound shaped like a child trying to speak through deep water. The sheriff stumbled back. The infant's finger slowly lowered, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. The message was clear. The hollow knew they had found the journal, and it wanted them to stop. Darrow County had an orphanage once, Pine Orchard Home, but it closed abruptly in 1872, after only 9 years of operation. Officially, it shut due to financial strain. Unofficially, the building gained a reputation for unplaceable children and inexplicable events. The sheriff began searching old town ledgers and found something chilling. For every child placed at Pine Orchard between 1863 and 1871, another unnamed child was admitted first. No birth records, no parents listed, no race, no age, no description, just a single symbol in the ledger column: the mark. The sheriff traveled to the rotting structure, which sagged behind a curtain of vines. Inside, he found a room that hadn't decayed like the rest. Its floorboards were intact. Its walls were lined with iron nails hammered in perfect geometric patterns, a containment chamber. In the center lay a cradle. Inside it, another infant. This one appeared the most complete of all. Normal skin tone, detailed features, breathing steadily. It would have passed as an ordinary newborn, if not for the absence of a shadow. The child cast no shadow. Not in lamplight, not even in direct sunlight through the broken roof. Dr. Holland stared at the shadowless infant for a long time before speaking. "This is what the hollow has been working toward," he said. "An imitation so precise it could live among us." The sheriff felt his stomach twist. If this child was the perfected form, then what were the others' attempts or warnings? The sheriff returned to Pastor Brand, demanding the truth. Brand refused at first, staring fixedly at the chapel floor. But when the sheriff placed the shadowless infant on the pew between them, the old man broke. Brand confessed that the church had known about the hollow since its founding. The earliest settlers in 1811 found the valley already marked by the circle and line symbol. They assumed it was left over from a vanished tribe, but the symbol did not match any indigenous culture in the region. The settlers tried to erase it, but erasing the mark had consequences. Brand revealed that the hollow did not take children. It traded for them. When the settlers destroyed the earliest boundary stones, the hollow demanded compensation. Children began disappearing. So the elders negotiated. They placed symbolic boundary markers at the edges of the hollow and agreed never to settle inside its deepest circle sinks. The hollow stopped taking children, but only after receiving a final offering. Brand refused to describe the offering, but the sheriff pressed him until his voice cracked. "It wasn't a sacrifice," Brand whispered. "Not in the way people think." The hollow wanted something human, something it could copy, something it could learn from. Then his eyes darkened, "And we gave it one." The sheriff staggered back. Whatever had been handed to the hollow in 1811 had not stayed there. It had been learning, and now it was returning its attempts. The sheriff, armed with Brand's confession and Dr. Penner's journal, pieced together the truth about the hollow year of 1846. It was not a curse, not a haunting, not a disease. It was an experiment. The offering given to the hollow in 1811, a single person had gone missing from all public records. Not a child, not an infant, a woman, gifted because she was barren, because she was considered expendable. Because the early settlers believed the hollow wanted a mother form to study. But the hollow's imitation was flawed. It tried to create children without understanding human development. Dozens of infants appeared, unfinished echoes of human babies, bodies paused in strange states of growth, some with bones too dense, some with eyes that never opened. The settlers panicked and attempted to end the pact by sealing the boundary stones. The hollow retaliated. Children vanished. Infants died in their cribs. Mothers reported missing time. And the humming filled the valley. To stop the retaliation, the elders made a second offering, this time giving the hollow an object instead of a person. A journal. Not Dr. Penner's, but something older. Something none of the elders would describe in detail except to say it contained the knowledge women carry but cannot speak aloud. The journal was placed into the largest sinkhole. The hollow year ended. But it had not forgotten. It had continued making attempts, and in 1912, the attempts were getting better. Deputies found it at the edge of the hollow sitting upright, waiting, eyes fully formed and following movement with eerie precision. Unlike the others, this child reacted to sound. When the doctor leaned close, the infant opened its mouth and released a sound no human throat could form, a layered echo. Multiple tones drifting in and out of harmony, as if several voices were speaking through a narrow passage. The sheriff froze. Dr. Holland whispered, "It's trying to communicate." The infant's gaze fixed on the sheriff. Its pupils expanded, then contracted, then expanded again, mimicking human emotional response, almost perfectly, almost. The sheriff asked what it wanted. The infant tilted its head slowly. Then, in a voice that was not a voice, it said, "Return." The word was distorted, as if spoken through a long metal tube. The sheriff stumbled backward. The infant lifted an arm, stretching its hand toward the tree line, toward the deep valley sinks, toward Saint's mouth. Dr. Holland's face went pale. "It wants us to give something back." The sheriff shook his head. "Give what?" The infant blinked once, a slow, unnatural motion. Then its body began collapsing inward, not melting, not decaying, collapsing, folding into itself like soft clay. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving only a smear of soot in the shape of the mark. The message was clear. The hollow didn't want its creations. It wanted what had been owed since 1811, with the infants vanishing and children still missing. The sheriff decided to do what no one in Darrow County had attempted in nearly a century. He would enter the hollow's deepest sink. Dr. Holland insisted on coming. Pastor Brand followed reluctantly, clutching a silver-bound book he refused to let go of. They approached Saint's mouth near dusk. The humming intensified, vibrating the air itself. Birds fell silent. The pines bent inward as if pushed by invisible pressure. The sheriff tied a lantern to his belt. Holland carried the medical bag. Brand muttered prayers under his breath. They descended using old surveyor ropes left from the 1880s mining attempt. The sinkhole led to a vast subterranean corridor, smooth, curved, and unnaturally warm. The walls were not carved by tools but shaped by some unknown force. Dozens of marks lined the passage. As they ventured deeper, they saw shapes suspended in the walls, vague outlines like half-formed limbs, faces pressed into the limestone, frozen and silent, eternal attempts to become real. The sheriff's breath caught. The hollow wasn't a place. It was a process, a thing that learned by imitating. At the tunnel's end lay a circular chamber, its center holding a stone cradle far larger than any human-made artifact. Pastor Brand stepped forward, trembling. "This is where they placed the first offering," he whispered. "This is where the hollow keeps what it takes." The sheriff raised his lantern. Inside the cradle, something moved. The lantern swayed, revealing a figure curled within the stone cradle, a woman, or something shaped like one. Her skin was pale, translucent. Her hair floated around her head as if suspended underwater. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. Dr. Holland whispered, "She's alive." The sheriff stepped closer. The woman's face, though aged strangely, bore the unmistakable features of the missing 1811 Solertha offering, preserved, unchanged, held in a state of suspended existence for more than a century. Pastor Brand broke down, sobbing. She was supposed to guide the hollow, teach it what human children should be. They didn't know. They didn't know it would keep her. Suddenly the humming intensified. The chamber walls pulsed. The figures embedded in the stone in finished forms shifted as if reacting to the sheriff's lantern. The offering opened her eyes. They were blank white. Her lips parted. Her layered, echoing voice emerged, stanch and broken, not her own. "Return what was promised." The sheriff shook his head furiously. "We didn't take anything." The offering's head tilted. The echoing voice answered, "You took what the hollow made. You broke the pact. Restore the exchange." The sheriff realized with horror. The hollow wasn't demanding a sacrifice. It wanted the infants returned to it. Its attempts, its experiments, its unfinished children. The ones that townspeople had buried. The ones that the church had burned. The ones it had spent a century trying to perfect. The sheriff stood trembling. "How do we return what no longer exists?" he asked. The offering or the thing, speaking through Hurstall, he lifted an arm, pointing toward a smaller tunnel branching off the chamber. "You buried them, Victory. But they do not stay buried." The sheriff felt the blood drain from his face. The church had concealed the infant bodies in a mass grave behind the chapel, a grave no one had visited in decades. The hollow had been reclaiming its creations all along. Pastor Brand fell to his knees. "We were trying to protect the town." The offering's voice rumbled through the chamber. "The town survived because the hollow allowed it. But the balance is broken. Return what remains, or the hollow will begin anew." The sheriff turned to Holland. "We have to bring the bodies here." Holland swallowed hard. "If we do this, What happens next? The sheriff didn't answer. They climbed back to the surface, retrieved the buried remains. Little remained of the first 3 infants and returned to the hollow at dusk. As they lowered the bundles into the central chamber, the humming shifted into a softer, almost mournful tone. The offering exhaled. The walls pulsed. The mark carved into the chamber floor glowed faintly. Then the bundles dissolved into the stone cradle and absorbed like water sinking into earth. The offering closed her eyes again. The humming faded. For a moment, the sheriff believed it was over. It was wrong. As the Sheriff Harlan and Brand climbed toward the surface, the ground trembled. The ropes shook violently. A deep groan resonated through the hollow, as if something enormous was shifting beneath the earth. They scrambled out just as the sinkhole erupted with a plume of cold air. The humming returned, but no longer as a whisper. It roared. From the tree line surrounding the hollow, pale shapes began to emerge. Dozens, then hundreds. Small forms, stepping out of the shadows, infants, toddlers, children of all ages, each one a failed attempt. Faces incomplete, eyes missing, limbs bent wrong, bodies trembling as if remembering how to move. Pastor Brand collapsed in terror. Dr. Holland whispered, "These are all the iterations, every attempt the hollow ever made." The sheriff drew his revolver despite knowing it was useless. The children stood in perfect silence, staring at the 3 men. Then, slowly, they turned not toward the sheriff, but toward the hollow, and walked. One by one, they stepped off the edge of the sinkhole, descending without falling, drawn downward by invisible force, returning every failed version reclaimed. When the last child vanished, the humming ceased. The sheriff stared into the dark, breath shaking. Dr. Holland said quietly, "The exchange is complete." But as they turned to leave, a faint cry emerged from the forest behind them. A single infant sat at the edge of the trees, perfect, breathing, human in every way. No mark. Holland lifted the child and examined it. "This one isn't from the hollow," he whispered. From the shadows, a second cry, then a third, then dozens. The hollow had finished learning, and now it had begun creating.